But through my walk along the Ganga and then the Ken, and then I walked across India with Paul Salopek, who was walking across India on the Outfeed and Walk. Sand extraction is something that really stood out. Crossing the River Son while on my walk along the Ganga. And it's an activity that kept repeating, especially when I was walking with Paul across central India. We encountered a lot of large scale sand mining. Just to define this problem for a lot of people, is that if I ask you and anybody who's watching this to just look around your room and identify three things that are made of sand and three things that are not made of sand. Let's just take a minute and do it. If you're watching this, you can do it in your house, in your office, wherever you are. Just look around your room and try and identify things that contain sand.
The only thing I can think of is walls and maybe outside in the garden. Oh, yeah, maybe glass does, isn't it? Yes. And then maybe something like a chair doesn't, carpet doesn't, phone doesn't, maybe.
Yeah, so I think this is a very interesting exercise that we do often, especially when we're in classrooms or if I'm doing a lecture in a public space, to also just sort of suddenly recognize the pervasiveness of sand in our lives, right? If you think about it in terms of volume, the maximum amount of volume of all things around you contains sand, which includes your walls, which includes the foundations, which includes the ceiling, which includes glass, and glass is everywhere. You're wearing glasses, your phone has a glass, phone also has sand, your laptop, iPad, computer, all electronic devices. Where are silicon chips made from? There's a lot to think of in terms of where all sand is. A large amount of what we look at, right, around us is sand of a particular quality and grade to construct our houses or construct any buildings or lay foundations. And those are typically extracted from rivers. All infrastructure around you containing sand, we have taken all of that from rivers. So then you start to visualize the scale of the extraction. There are guidelines at central level. States have their own policies around it, and states have their own laws around it. It's a state subject in India. Some reports say India alone extracts 3 to 4 billion tons of sand a year, which is a lot of sand. There are very varying estimates, but what we do know for sure is A, that there is severe underreporting of the amount of sand that is extracted from our rivers. B, whatever is extracted, a very tiny percentage of that is legal. We're not even going into the question of sustainable and unsustainable. A large part of the sand extracted in India is illegal. Sometimes I get the response, but it's important for development. What's important to sort of think about is the question of development for whom. It's not housing for the poor that's needing so much sand. A lot of the sand is feeding a speculative real estate market where we have millions of empty housing units in India, which exist purely for speculation. Sand is thought of as inert, right? That's our relationship with sand. But I'd like to change that today. I have learned this from many scientists and communicators who've taught this to me, and I owe it to them for these explanations. But sand is home for microorganisms. Sand is habitat for microorganisms. Microorganisms are fed on by macro and then larger organisms. Eventually, fish will eat the macrovertebrates. The fish will be eaten by the dolphin, the gharial, the crocodiles, and by us. So when you remove the sand, you're not just removing sand, you're removing a habitat which is at the base of a food chain. So you're essentially wiping out the entire food chain when you're extracting sand. And that's something that we don't consider at all. Or when we think of sand, we don't think of life. We think of lifelessness. Flip to switch in our head is we should start thinking about sand as life. It's life where it is, of course, but it's life where it's flowing. It takes nutrients with it. It goes to the ocean. It's connected to a larger life cycle, which is also the food cycle that we as humans rely on. So that's something to think about. That sand is also life. Sand is also what controls floods. Sand is also what creates floodplains, which recharge our groundwater. So there's a lot of things to think about when you think about sand. And this material is being extracted at very large magnitudes. And even for a moment, if I had to keep aside the environmental question, the economic question still remains unanswered of where the money that is being generated from the extraction of such high volumes of sand, where is it going? And that's a question to ponder about.